Good evening. Welcome to this event of Chennai International Centre. We have the privilege of hosting Ms. Nirmala Lakshman with her latest book called The Tamils. To join her in conversation is Ms. Kausalya Santhanam, and I have the privilege of introducing them. First, Ms. Nirmala Lakshman. She is currently publisher and chairperson of the Hindu Group of Publications and was earlier joint editor of the paper. She founded and edited the Hindu Literary Review, conceptualized and created Young World, India's only children's newspaper supplement, and developed several other feature sections of the Hindu. She launched Lit for Life, the Hindu's annual literature festival, and continues to curate it. She has a PhD in postmodern fiction and has written a book on Chennai, Degree Coffee by the Yard, and edited an anthology of contemporary Indian journalism, Writing a Nation. Her latest book, The Tamils, a portrait of a community, has been launched in January 2025. She is on the boards of several philanthropic trusts and also serves on the boards of a few companies. Welcome, ma'am. Please. I have the privilege of introducing Ms. Kausalya Santhanam. She is well known to CIC. She has been part of our programs, several programs earlier. She has completed her BA Honours and MA in English Literature from Central College, Bangalore, followed by an MPhil in Comparative Literature at Madurai Kamraj University. She joined The Hindu in 1984 and had a prolific 30-year career writing on women's issues, heritage, literature, and more. She has interviewed leading figures like Shakespearean expert Sir Frank Kermode, novelist William Dalrymple and Shashi Deshpande, translator Lakshmi Holstorm, primatologist Jane Goodall, and activist Ela Bhatt, founder of SEVA. She received the Chevening Scholarship, a Cambridge Fellowship, and multiple awards. Her book, Pioneers, Stars in the Madras Galaxy, was published in 2023 and was launched by Tamil Nadu's Chief Minister, Mr. M.K. Stalin, on Madras Day. I think we are in for a very, very interesting session. I hand over the mic now to Ms. Santhanam and request her to take the proceedings forward.
Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here today, and I thank all of you for coming. I thank the Chennai International Centre for organizing this, and I thank Mr. Chandramouli, who is the managing director of the center, for holding this event and enabling it to happen. I also thank Mr. Sabrivas, the head of the events, who has been very supportive. Of course, for me, it's a great pleasure and privilege to be in conversation with the chairperson of the Hindu, Dr. Nirmala Lakshman, regarding her book, The Tamils, Portrait of a Community. I know Mrs. Lakshman, as I call her, for the last 4 decades, since I joined the Hindu in 1984 as a sub-editor, and thanks to her, I became a features writer. She was my features editor, and if I may say so, absolutely brilliant. She was so dynamic, and she brought in so many new features, the pioneering Young World, and then the folio, a thematic supplement so beautifully produced that today it is a collector's item. Also, she greatly enhanced the Friday Review, the Sunday magazine, and as well also the Metroplus. And she also started, as he said, the literary supplement, which then led to the Hindu Lit Fest, which is the most anticipated event now in the city and in the entire country. So it is for me a matter of great pride and privilege to be here today talking to her about her book. Her love for Tamil and for the Tamil way of life led her to write Degree Coffee by the Yard, which spoke about her love for the city of Chennai, which was Madras. And now there is this magnum opus, the Tamils. It is an amazing work. It is so panoramic in its scope, and it starts right from the Stone Age, covering the history of the Tamils across the centuries, the Sangam age, the division of the land into the various Tines, and then the Pallavas, the Cholas, the Pandyas, the Cheras, then, of course, the Nayaks, the Marathas, the coming of the English, and the freedom movement, and then the present age with the Dravidian movement, and even further. It is a work which is marked by in-depth research and a wonderful narrative style. It is so absorbing, and it is seamless and multi-layered. You learn so much about Tamilagam when you read the book and about the Tamil people, even if you're yourself Tamil. It teaches you a number of aspects of the Tamil land and in a way which grips your attention throughout. She weaves together so beautifully stories and legends, interviews, the beauty of nature and the beauty created by man, the architectural wonders, the arts, the coming together of so many religions to this wonderful region, and the entire harmony that exists in this region which we all inhabit. I really congratulate her on such a beautiful book, and it kept me completely engrossed. I would like to start by talking a little about the book in the sense I like to read a few, maybe a paragraph from the beginning of the book, the introduction, and it is so beautifully and evocatively called This Jasmine Country. And later the writer tells us that this is a quotation from the Ahana I think, Ahana where he says that this is the beautiful Jasmine country and this is a wonderful region. A fertile heartland overlooked by rugged mountain ranges on one side and saluted by a long sandy coast and a vast sea on the other, cradles an ancient yet enduring civilization. This civilization has persevered for more than 2,500 years. It finds celebration in the literature of the Tamil Sangam, a confluence of poets and scholars that emerged as early as 400 years before Christianity. The terrain bears a remarkable continuity of language, culture, ideas, and beliefs. These elements have been shaped not only by their roots in antiquity, but also by the natural openness of the Tamil people. An openness that embraced the march of kings and soldiers from the north of the land, traders from West Asia, as well as seafarers and explorers who arrived from distant shores to mingle with the local people and make this region their home. So you can imagine from this introduction what a magnificent book it is. And I would like to start my questions again from the very beginning. How did you think of writing this book? How did it all begin?
Thank you very much, Kausalya, for that absolutely kind and generous introduction. But first of all, I'd like to thank the CIC for hosting an evening like this. And thank you, Mr. Chandramouli, for the kind invitation, and to Mr. Sabrivas for organizing this. And thank you all for coming. Many of you might have heard me speak about this book before, so I hope you'll bear with some kind of repetition. Some of you have heard it several times, so I hope it's not going to be too pedestrian for you. But thank you very much. This is indeed something that I found it was a very difficult and challenging task, but as Kausalya said, it's something that is very close to many of us who live here in this region, whether we are Tamil or not. There's a great curiosity to understand what is this, the history of where we come from. And this is, I think, something that's common across societies. It's just the basic curiosity of a human being to look back on history and culture and find out what it was. I was very fortunate that my friend, David R., who's the editor of Aleph Book Company, was a long-standing friend. And to be very correct, he was a columnist for The Hindu for about 20 years when he was editor of Penguin India. Then he went on to lead Penguin in other parts of the world and came back to India to found this company called Aleph Book Company in conjunction with Rupa. And he has set about doing the biographies of different communities. There's a marvelous book that's just come out, which I think is absolutely superb. I mean, one of the best community biographies that I've read recently, called The Gujaratis by Salil Tripathi, and this came out around the same time as the Tamils. There's also a book on the Assamese, and there are a couple of other biographies, community biographies. David was very interested in looking at exploring what it meant to be part of a particular community from somebody who knew the region and somebody who was a resident of the region, whether close to the region, understanding of the region, or a little removed. So I felt very privileged that he asked me to do this book. And so it was commissioned by Aleph. And he said that it could be an impressionistic one, because I was very nervous because I'm not a historian or an academic, and my background is in English literature. But he was confident enough to say that he would help me, to say, please go ahead with it, and said that he would handhold me throughout the process, which he very kindly did. And he was by no means a lenient editor. He was extremely demanding and difficult. And I remember one crucial time I said, what if I don't finish it? He said, who cares? So I think that really pushed me to finish the task with a much more urgency than I had allowed myself. And so it was a period of four long years. In between, there was COVID, and I intended the COVID period to be a time of research, and we were all stuck at home, but no such thing happened, and you get caught up with Netflix and what have you. So I really didn't keep to any deadline. But as I said, that after 4 years, I thought, let me just get on with this. So it was around 2021 that I started, 19 or so I started it, and had it finished by early 24.
And with a book like this, it's always a question, who is the target reader?
Yes.
What's the target
So given that the background of my own background is journalism, I thought the best, David also felt, we had many conversations. He said, let it talk to the common person, the Tamilian who lives here, the Tamilian who is part of the diaspora, or any other person who's interested in the history of this region. Let it speak to that person. So I didn't look at age, I didn't look at gender, I didn't look at academia or any such thing. I just wrote as I would speak. And one thing was, I wanted to be sure that I adhered meticulously to facts. And I thought, to make this an authentic experience, I would have to actually go and see all these places. The other interesting thing was that I found that a lot of the epigraphists, the historians, particularly those who write and do research in Tamil, were not known to the whole Anglo-Saxon publishing world. So I thought I would be a messenger for their voices more than anything. And I had the privilege of journeying with them, with several of them. And we made a nice little team, and we made about 6 to 8 visits down south, maybe even more, to find the stories.
So that comes to the question of a book like this is like an iceberg, right? There's so much that is underneath, and you do so much work, go to so many distant places, to riverbeds, to caves, to monuments, to cities, villages. And then you also have so many interviews packed into the book. So you have this enormous amount of material. It can be really overwhelming. So how did you think of structuring the book? How did you go about structuring it, and how did you plan it?
Yeah, we discussed this several times, my editor and I, and what he felt would be the best approach to such a complex subject was to use the chronological approach, because that's why, as you said, it starts with the history of the early human presence in the region, right up to the present day, as far as possible, he said, because I wanted to stop it. I said, let's stop with Jayalalitha's death or some such thing. He said, no, the book is going to come out in 25. Can't leave 10 years, 15 years out of it. You have to come right up to the present time. So it was a taxing situation. But I decided, after some time, he said, why don't you this each age or each era could be broken up into smaller segments, and that made it easier for me to collect the material and to put it together. So every segment was we decided to do like age of poetry, which was the Sangam age, then the age of kings, and the age of empire, and other segments were put together like that. And under each of those, we wrote about the history and literature of the times. We wrote about the political achievements. We also wrote about the land and the people, the administration, how common people fared. Because as one of the leading epigraphists, Dr. Vedachalam, told me, history is not just about kings and rulers. It's about common people and what they achieved. And it's very hard to find that information because it's not easily available. The stories are always about kings and their achievements.
You have this very nice segment where you talk about the exploitation of the landlords of the peasants and how during the Naik era it was really bad. So you have this very sympathetic, very empathetic gaze as well.
That's kind of you to say. So actually what happened was, even right from the early times, whenever there was some strife within communities, there's always been one is exploited and one is the exploiter. And very often these are not recorded stories at all, whether it's to do with religion or caste groups or any other kind of segmentation. There's always one group that suffers more than the other. And this information was very hard to come by. Strangely enough, in some of the little temple inscriptions, you would catch a line saying that a group of peasants protested against the appropriation of land by some other. And we actually saw this on our journeys. So I found that those were very good peepholes into what actually transpired in society. And like you said, right up to the more recent times, 17th, 18th century, the exploitation of people. I felt that since Dr. Vedachalam told me that I had to keep the life and times of the people in mind, also writing about rulers and their achievements.
And being Tamil, how difficult was it to write a book like this, to get detachment, to get objectivity?
I think it was quite difficult because for me too, it was a great journey of discovery. Like many people, I'm sure, around us, we all grew up in a slightly anglicized atmosphere. We're all exposed to we all grew up with a Western education. We know some Tamil, some of us don't know Tamil, some of us know other languages. And there's the ties that bind we're not as strongly anchored to the region as we'd like to be. And so in that sense, it was also a great learning experience for me. And I found that in that sense, there was a lot of excitement, no detachment at all. So I found it hard. But when you look and read inscriptions, for example, where they just said, this was given to this land and that, it was interesting to see. And, you could remove yourself from the thing. And one very fascinating thing was that something that was done 1,000 years ago or 2,000 years ago, after about several hundreds of years, some a laborer, a tenant farmer could reclaim his land based on those inscriptions. He went back to the king and appealed and got his land back. And this was adjudication that happened after several hundreds of years. So these were the kind of things that were greatly interesting. At the same time, I felt that, this is the objective thing of it. But there was a lot of very little detachment, I would say. I was just fascinated by everything that I saw.
And then the Sangam poems, I know, particularly appeal to you. You like their very contemporary feel. They're startlingly modern, and there is this feeling, they talk about universal emotions and feelings of loss, and then wonderful feelings of love and valor. How did you relate to other aspects of Tamil literature? Was there something which specially appealed to you and which you're passionate about, apart from Sangam poems?
The Sangam poetry itself, I think a lot of the emphasis has been on bravery, on warriors, on women betrayed by lovers, etc., etc. But even in themselves, there's a lot of interest in the environment. For instance, there was a poet who wrote about how if you have to be a wise person, you should learn to care for the land. If you have to care for the land, you have to care for the soil. And if you have to care for the soil, you have to care for your waterways. And this is what replenishes the land and creates productivity and agricultural prosperity. So I found those poems very, very interesting. And later on, also, the poem of the imagination, Shilpadigaram, for instance, has, apart from the story of Kannai, has a beautiful description of how Madurai was in those days, and the brilliant translation of R. Parthasarathy, because I'm not a great reader of Tamil, so I find that those kind of texts difficult to access. But fortunately, with A.K. Ramanujam, with R. Parthasarathy, with many people like poets like that, or distinguished writers, they have brought it to us, and it's our great privilege to be able to enjoy those works. Shilpadigaram is another beautifully translated poem, as you know. And subsequently, of course, the poems of Bharati, which coming into the new age, and a lot of the current the literature during the freedom struggle was also very, very moving, because it also portrayed the signs of the times that, and as we were growing up, we read many of those things and were inspired by writers of those times.
Yeah, actually, you have this very lovely segment where you talk of Mahatma Gandhi and how he comes to the home of Ambu Jamal wearing a loincloth, dhoti, and how he started wearing the loincloth in Madurai, and also how he brought Kasturba along with him, and she was this petite little woman who accompanied him. And you speak about Rajaji. I was very happy that you spoke about Rajaji, because he's somebody we admire a lot. And we thought that it is so good that you've given a segment on how much he supported Gandhiji and how he became a supporter. And also, we've all grown up reading the Ramayana and his epics, isn't it? That's how we got into our tradition and our epics and our literature. As children, all of us learnt the Ramayana first. Yeah.
Yeah, if I can be a little personal here.
Yeah, sure. We do
So,
want to know.
Rajaji was somebody who was, my maternal grandfather worked with him during the freedom movement, and was jailed from Tanjavur. And he was somebody who followed Rajaji throughout. And, that the salt march that they did, copying the Dandi march, they had done it here in Vedaranyam. And he was part of all of that. And subsequently, as we grew up in our own household, especially in my mother's family, as much as there was an adulation of Gandhiji, there was also great admiration of Rajaji. And I remember that we were taken to see him at one point, and with the books. And I think he was very old; he couldn't write in too many books, and he ascribed the book to my sister Malini. And I was very upset because I wanted the book written to me. But that is a lovely story. I'll not forget. He was actually. There was a glow about him. And then the next thing we knew was we watched his funeral from the top of the Hindu office building. And I remember feeling it as if it was a personal loss. Not that we had, constant interaction with him, but very much an important figure in our family's life. And like you said, I'm glad you mentioned this, not only about the Mahabharata and Ramayana, but also he wrote these very poignant stories about the plight of farmers, and the real poverty that was underlying, and much of it was in English. He wrote in English as facilely as he wrote in other languages. And I think those were very moving to me, especially as somebody who's interested in literature. And also this whole social, the social centered thing, and we don't know too much about. We talk about the politics of that whole freedom movement, and I think that inspired a lot of things in our own childhood, and very much a part of the fabric of our lives.
And what else in your family background came into play when you wrote this book? What influenced your writing of the book?
I tried to avoid it because I think in the first book, Degree Coffee, a little bit of it slipped out. But I was very determined not to bring it in. In any way. Right. So, do mention the founding of the Hindu as part of the whole tradition of when the English journalism came to the fore, and these young men protested the British judge's judgment, and they got together and wrote this pamphlet, which ultimately became the Hindu. But I tried to avoid that, except to mention it in the context of historical record. So
Okay.
I didn't want to let that permeate this.
And you spoke, of course, of Subramanya Bharati, and all of us are, we just hero worship him because of all the passion he brought into his poetry. But it was always within a pan-Indian consciousness, which you don't always see during recent times. You don't see that. So, did you feel particularly impressed by that aspect of his poems?
I think that's an important aspect of the Tamil mind, and I think that some of it is lost now, Kausalya, or was lost in the tumultuousness of politics that intervened in the, during the freedom years. It's very, very important that while the national movement was being played out, Justice Party was formed, and there was the non-Brahmin manifesto was written up. And I think those are very, very important parallel things. I don't think one was more important than the other, but the notion of a larger national identity was always part of, I think, a lot of the Tamilian identity, because I think many political people with the political intent in Tamil Nadu were, especially during the years of the freedom movement, very caught up in the struggle. And one marvels there was no Instagram, there was no
Yeah,
instant
absolutely.
communication. How the news of what happened in Delhi,
Passion for the country, I think,
it spread everywhere like wildfire. How people caught on, whether it was to change to khadi or whether it was to boycott British goods. It was a movement. Similarly, in Tamil Nadu, I think there was an equal energy and interest in that. There was everybody here, many people here were
Kapaloti,
part of
Tamil, so many
Tamil,
of them.
so many of them really
Yeah.
were part of the national movement. At the same time, I don't think it clashed with the emerging Dravidian identity, which I think was equally important and played itself out on the Tamil stage particularly.
But do you think in the present times, the identity, the Tamil identity, which historically was there, it has changed, and is it now in opposition to the identity of the Hindi heartland?
I think, unfortunately, a lot of polarization has occurred in the last couple of decades. And I think earlier, I think there was a sense of everything is pan-Indian as well as Tamil. There was no let-up in Tamil pride or identity. And particularly during the time of the things like the anti-Hindi movement or the anti-Hindi agitation, Tamil identity rises more to the fore, and there's much more passion and fear around the imposition of anything. But I think on the whole, in terms of the context, it's a very proud identity that says, yes, we're part of this larger national setup, but we're also Tamilian. So I think there's no sacrifice of one to the other. But certainly there were moments when things happen, and such as now these talks about delimitation, or again the use of Hindi and all that. This Tamil pride rises to the fore, and I think there is an issue when anything is imposed on anybody, and as any freedom-loving
That's
people
true.
protest against that. So in that
So
sense, I think
natural.
Tamilians are very sensible. They react only when they're goaded.
Okay. And then throughout your book, throughout this work, there is this strong glistening thread of tolerance and liberalism. I love that because you've spoken about all these various religions. We have the Vedic religion, then there's Buddhism, Jainism, Christianity, Islam, everything. But then there's been a lot of tolerance also. And you speak on page 156, if I'm right, about Rajaraja Chola, how he supported the Buddhist viharas. And later, much later, of course, in contemporary times, you talk of how in Tirunelveli recently you met a Muslim man and his daughter, and they stopped at a wayside Hindu shrine and they offered worship. So I think this thread of unity, of tolerance, liberalism, you underline it a lot, and that is very heartwarming.
Thank you, because I think that's an important aspect of being Tamil, and I think I don't know, because we were protected by geography, protected by minimal invasions, and we always welcomed the migrating person, whether it was from the traders from West Asia or the Buddhists and the Jains who walked in from the north. They were always amalgamated into Tamil society, and we know that, for instance, in the coastal regions when the Islamic traders first came, they all were followed local customs. Very interesting. And my friend Anwar had a great deal to say about this. And he's done a lovely film, as you might have
Yes.
seen, Yadu.
Yes, I have seen
Where, the local communities practice its most, and I have a chapter called
Yes, I saw it.
Tamil by birth, but
Islam.
Islam
No,
by
by
faith.
birth.
By faith.
Yeah.
So there is that very strong thing in Tamil Nadu, I think, where there is the sense of syncretic culture is permeated very deeply within us. And I think that tolerance is part of the Tamil identity. There's never a situation where one is put against the other. And though I do want to point out that there were periods when which, for instance, the Jains were put to a great deal of difficulty by certain kings from the Chola rulers, the Pallava rulers. I mean, many of them were tolerant, and while they were practicing Jains or Hindus, they supported the other religion. And Kanchipuram is a wonderful example of where Jain, Vaishnava, Shaivite, and Buddhist faith all flourished together. But having said that, there were, even in the Tevaram, there are lines where which the poet saints have bitterly opposed Jain theology and the Jain faith is as it is. And I think many
I
Jains
think the
were
Bhakti
persecuted.
movement also
Also,
came
yes,
because of
absolutely. And
that.
there was a kind of there was a persecution that happened in periods, and I think we cannot get away from those truths of history. It's very important to accept that. It's not that Tamil Nadu is always a generous, peace-loving region. There have been difficult periods, challenging periods, but in the end, there's a peaceful coexistence always comes to the fore.
And then, of course, there's Nagareshu Kanchi, which Kalidasa, I think,
Yes.
said Nagareshu Kanchi. If there is a city, then the best is Kanchi. And then, of course, we have Brihadishwara and Tanjavur, and we had goddess Meenakshi and Madurai. All these wonderful, beautiful cities which grew up and with this amazing architecture. And especially, I think none of us can go to the big temple or the Brihadishwara and not come away awed. You don't feel it's the work of any man at all because it's so magnificent. And it strikes you in the same way as the pyramids of Egypt strike you so many thousands of years ago. What do you think was in the Tamil mind and in the psyche that enabled them to think so big?
I think there was always a quest for artistic perfection, and whether it was a king or a laborer who was working under him, there's this quest to create, and this creativity I think, is at the core of the Tamil identity. I think it's an important aspect of Tamil culture, and I think the kings were not content by just just by increasing their personal wealth. There was a sense of wanting to share it with the larger community. As you know, the temple, particularly Brihadishwara, with all its wall inscriptions, was a marvelous center of economic activity. A lot of it employed thousands of people, not even hundreds, thousands of people who were accountants, who were dancers, who were, stable keepers, and all of it is on the walls of the temple. And you can see even today that the records of Rajaraja, where he established all of this kind of marvelous world. And I think there was a vision that not just the king, but also the laborer who shared that vision. All the laborers, unlike European art or European where everything is signed, there's the anonymity, the beautiful anonymity of the Indian craftsperson, which is rarely. I mean, the names are hardly known. You know about Rajaraja, but you don't know who really constructed the temple.
But in Karnataka, it's a little different.
Is it?
When you
Yeah.
go to Karnataka, some of the Hoysala temples, you will see Mallamma, Mallanna, Shivappa, all those names will be inscribed on the sculptures. But in a way, it's nice, isn't it, to immortalize them and
Yes,
for us to remember them after so many centuries.
There's actually one inscription in a place called Punjeri near Mamallapuram, which lists the details of the carpenter, the sculptor, the
Oh,
stonemason
how
who
lovely.
worked. About 16 names are mentioned in a couple of rock inscriptions.
fascinating is
And
that?
so I thought that was very moving.
Yes.
And but like you said, unlike Karnataka, there's very little mention of the names of people. And I don't know if you know this famous story that. When a master sculptor was carving something, I think probably Bradishwara, somebody was somebody was
I
fanning
read
him,
that in your book.
and then he turns around and there was a pause. So he turns around to see why he was not being fanned, and it turns out that the king wanted to do the
How
the
marvelous
planning
is that?
for the sculpture. So, I mean, those are the lovely stories, true or not. That's part of this whole the Tamil culture, the desire to, the desire for excellence, I think, is
Yes,
deeply hold to it.
absolutely. And
Yeah.
when you go to one of our temples, you've described the Pandya temples also very beautifully, and all the sculptures which are there. It seems to have moved you very deeply. And of course, Jain paintings and Jainism itself seems to hold a special interest for you, and you seem to love it. And Sittanavasil, of course, is amazing. All of us, I mean, I haven't been there, but I've been told often that when somebody says Sittanavasil, I look very excited because it's such a, we've seen it in visuals and it's so beautiful, isn't it? Those lotuses, the elephant and the lake.
And it's not, but it's particularly interesting because amidst the assumptions that you make about Jainism are all kind of misproved or disproved when you actually see a place like Sittanavasil, where the Jain monk is on his way to seeking moksha or on the road to salvation. At the same time, there's a joyfulness that's on the
Oh,
temple
okay.
walls. It's very, very faded, and it's you can only somebody like if you have a passionate interest in that,
Yes.
you will spend hours looking at it. And they've compared it with the Ajanta fresco paintings and said it is of equal level, the same
Beautiful.
level as that. The paint is faded, but at the same time, you can see that the monk's journey, where there's a beautiful pond where there's flying fish, there are elephants spraying water on each other. There's a joyfulness
About it, which you
it's
don't
not fully
think
there.
would
You
be
don't think that, and I think that
Jainism.
what was fascinating was what was there. What was the thinking of these Jain monks who lived in these caves? They used to come down the hill to heal people or to preach to them, having very little for themselves. And I thought this sense of self, this abnegation was a very important virtue that I think side by side with the celebration of life was something that was very fascinating. And this is just a little bit of a relic left there. And I think that everybody should visit and
Yes,
see
and
this.
even in the big temple, you have these beautiful paintings,
Yes,
isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah.
Those frescoes and
Yes.
about the wedding of Sundarar.
Yes,
There's
yes,
such a
yeah,
beautiful
yeah, yeah.
fresco, and I think you were also very fascinated by the big temple. And then coming on to more modern times, how, as a person belonging to a particular community, how were you able to write about the Dravidian movement and about caste and about all these problems which arise, in community? How were you able to get a detached view about it? And how has the response been of those who don't belong to our community to this book?
I think a lot of help came because we've been trained in journalism, and right from the beginning, when you do reportage, you have to put yourself away and write about the situation. And I think that helped me a lot. And essentially, we can see the playing out of history, the playing out of facts, and you know that there is a privilege in a particular community that's used this privilege for centuries, and it's obviously important to see the other side as well. So I tried as far as possible because of the journalism experience. I think I managed to stay clear of any particular bias, and
Yes, you've done it very well.
I don't know about that,
Very
but
difficult.
I found that it's important always to keep the human aspect at the center of everything. Then you could see the impact of say privilege only for a few, how it affected those who were not privy to that privilege, didn't have access to those privileges. Obviously, you had to write about them. And I found that there's been, luckily, Kausalya, as of now, little criticism of bias. I've been trolled here and there saying, you reveal your whatever your privilege, your bias or your whatever your caste situation. Because I think the reference was to what I quoted David Schulman, the great Hebrew
of course.
linguist,
I used
who
to
said
even quote his dust.
yeah, he said that Tamil has been enriched by, to use his words, loan words from Sanskrit. So I think this is something that none of us can avoid. Tamil has been enriched by Telugu, by Malayalam. Malayalam has been enriched by Tamil, Telugu. And it was in fact only a quotation from Schulman. And somebody wrote and said, this is typical. The moment you've said that, you've, kind of destroyed whatever you've written because, there is this sense of not, accepting that Tamil is pure and thing. It's not a fact, and I thought I should speak the truth.
But
So
what about Tamil having English words now?
exactly, exactly.
There's so
There's
much.
a lot of that. So I
Yes,
don't
there's
know.
a lot
but,
of that. So I
yeah,
don't know what the purists think of
yeah,
that.
yeah, I wonder. Right?
And also, you talk a lot about the women in the sense that you talk about Avayar and you talk about Andal. And of course, you talk about the great queen, Sambhya Mahadevi, and her contribution during Chola times, and also about Rani Mangamal. But there's not a separate chapter on women in your book.
Yeah. Fair criticism. Thank you for pointing that out. But I found that the examples of these women that you've mentioned were across different centuries. And as each segment where I wrote about society, where I wrote about arts and literature, and wherever it was relevant, I mentioned their names. I think it's just like the diaspora didn't get much play in the book. I feel that this was due to this constraint of space and having to quickly tell the story. And I really felt that I didn't do justice. In fact, Sembyan Mahadevi was a discovery for me. And I was just amazed that this queen
She's done
who
amazing work.
restored Pandya temples, and she also left an inscription. After restoring the temple, she left an inscription to say that she's a Chola queen who did that. The honesty of her, the work that she did was pretty amazing. So I wished I could have talked more about all of that, but I
Of
just...
course, you can't talk of everything. Like when we go on to tourist spots, we can't see everything, as somebody told me when you went to Greece. So that's true. But what about these huge canvas of characters you have and events? It's spread across millennia. And are there some who spoke specially to you and some whom you wish you had written more about, and some events in particular which particularly struck you?
I think there was very little information about, I found, for instance, there was that in Tiruvallarai temple, there's a lovely saying which says, well, from an anonymous poet who says, don't fall in love with life. Do your daily duty and don't look over your shoulder always for death, but do what you have to do in your daily life. And I wonder who that anonymous poet was. A lot of the beauty that came from the ideas that enriched Tamil culture and history are from anonymous people. So I always wish there had been more information on them. And that kind of, threw me a little bit. 'Cause I tried to discover more, but I couldn't, for instance, go beyond a particular thing because there's no reference and no mention. And I feel like, for instance, even during the freedom movement, I could have written a little more, whether it's the story of Kapaloti Tamil, or as you said, more about Rajaji.
Velu Nachiyar and people like that.
Absolutely. And even this whole romanticization of that whole Marudu brothers and Kattaban.
Yes. Kattaboman you've written,
yes,
of course.
little bit more. There were more stories to be told, but unfortunately, those were the periods when these people were small little chieftains who really protested foreign rule. And I think they were the early pioneers of the whole struggle against colonial rule and the impossible situation that the colonial powers, not just the British, but the French and the Dutch and the Portuguese had left us. And I think the brave soldiers of that, I wish I'd had an opportunity to write more about their individual stories, and I couldn't do that.
Yeah, but about endowments, the temple endowments, you have a lot of the women, especially those who were temple dancers, they had given a lot of land as well as ghee for burning lamps, etc. And you've covered that a bit, right?
Yeah.
And also, what I liked was when you spoke about the Nayak era, and you speak of Thirumalai Nayak, and then you speak about that image in the temple. I think the Madurai Meenakshi temple in the Pudu Mandapam. Sorry, the Madurai Meenakshi temple in the Pudu Mandapam. You speak about Thirumalai Nayak. He's praying, but you say he looks very regal and he's standing in a very, authoritative pose. And he also has his queens with him, very timid, much behind him. So that tells us a lot, right? And you have also mentioned about one of his queens who's turned away a little from the rest of the group. These little observations were very nice in the book. I liked it.
Thank you, Kausalya. I think a lot of it was, because David also encouraged storytelling. He said, for instance, for this little Pallava prince who came from somewhere in South Asia to take over the Pallava kingdom. He said, just imagine the story, stick to the narrative facts. And we all know that Tirumalai Nayak was a person of great excess. He added much to the Madurai, to the not only Meenakshi temple, to the Srirangam temple, to various temples. And the Nayaks really, they were all, as you know, they were given authority by the Vijayanagara kings.
Yes.
And I think they enjoyed a period of great unrestrained, power, and they had wealth, and they could create all these structures and things. And I think that he created a lot of mandapams for celebrations, and it was
Yes.
post that 40-year rule of the Madurai sultans. So I think there was a sense of, now we can do whatever we want. So there was a little bit of an excess, and I think that's when the queen looks fed up. She wants out none of that.
Yeah, must be. And earlier you spoke about Tamil diaspora. How is their reaction to the book? You recently went to Kuala Lumpur, I think, and how did they react? And what has been the reaction from those in Sri Lanka, which is so close to us in terms of culture and geography, and also those far away, as in the US or UK? Do you get responses from them, and how are they reacting to the book?
Not so much from the West yet, but when I went to Malaysia, I was very stunned that there was so much interest in the history of, Tamilagam. And because a lot of them have been living there for 3 or 4 generations, they went over as, bonded labor. And of course, from Sri Lanka, the Tamils who went were all accountants and railway clerks and things like that. And they all wanted to know the history of this region of Tamil Nadu in India. So I found that very, very interesting. And I found that there was a lot of, I don't know, it's just the audience that came. There's a lot of questions about the evolution of this history and the impact on their particular families. And there were poignant stories to be told about how, and I think they're preserving their Tamil identity very strongly because they're located in a larger political structure that's not always conducive to their upholding their own cultural
values.
traits and values. So I think there's a sense, as there is in any place that you go abroad and you find there's a minority of people, they want to hold on to their values more strongly. So there was a lot of interest from there. And I think much more dispersed here. There are groups of peer. There's a lot of response, and I've been actually surprised by especially young people who said that, they want to know more. So that's been very heartening.
I'm sure. And what do you think defines the Tamil identity? How does it set it apart from other regional identities?
I'm very kind of wary of, I said that in the book, of claiming any exceptionalism. Tough question, Kausalya. No, because you can't say that any community is exceptional. I don't buy into that at all, because, and I've also, ran this by Professor Arjuna Appadurai of New York University, who's done a great deal of work on sociology, a brilliant academic. And he very firmly said, there's nothing that's exceptional about any particular community. You can't state those in large terms. But if there's anything at all, he pointed out about the unity of the language and the continuity of Tamil from the Sangam era onwards. He said, if a politician today stands on a small makeshift stage and speaks in a passionate, poetic language, the guy on the street, the auto rickshaw driver or the shopkeeper in the neighboring area would understand what he's saying. And he said he may not be a literate person who follows high-flown Tamil, but there is a resonance. So I think the beauty of the language, there's been a continuity in language usage. There's no, for instance, there's old Greek and there's modern Greek. There's none of that. There's Tamil, there's literary Tamil and spoken Tamil, but apart from that, if you read the Sangam poems, there is an understanding that there's something that can resonate with you as you move down the centuries, and I think that's very exceptional. The second thing I would say is there's this sociologist called Valentine Daniel, I mentioned him. He said this particular connection to your one's uru is very much a Tamil trait. I mean, this is something that he's observed, so I've quoted him. And he said uru can mean, for somebody living in Canada, uru can mean India, it can mean Tamil Nadu. For somebody who lives in Kerala or Mysore, if you're a Tamilian, it could mean Tamil Nadu. For somebody who's living outside his own city or village, it could only mean, it could mean the village. So there are multiple layers of how you perceive your connection with home, and that's probably a very important thing to a Tamil.
But what is very distressing is now there's so much hyperbole, isn't it?
Yeah.
And of course, claiming antiquity of Tamil, not by archaeological evidence, but just through mere words and claims. That is really sad, the way they're doing it, very
Completely
politicized.
agree. Now with new methods like carbon testing and carbon testing, there used to be fragments used to be sent to Florida for testing, but now it's even being done in India. This recent discovery of iron smelting, and they push it back to 5,000, 6,000 years. And I spoke to Professor Rajan, who was one of those who spearheaded
Yes,
some of the early excavations, and they said it doesn't go back beyond 3,000, maybe it goes to 3, 5, or 4,000 years at the most. 6,000 years, 7,000 years is a
It's
bit of an
too,
exaggeration, and I would dare say, sometimes it's politically useful to claim that antiquity. There's a frenzy, and then what I would call there is in some quarters an antiquity frenzy.
Very
which,
true.
I think that,
Absolutely, it's
yeah,
there.
so,
And
yeah.
lastly, I just want to ask you, how is your feeling of being a Tamil, your Tamilness? How has it been enhanced because of this book? Do you feel more Tamil than before you started writing
Yes,
it?
absolutely, absolutely. Very, very grateful to have had this opportunity because, we've, I think many of us have this common thing, as I said in the beginning, of
Growing
being
up in
very exposed to
Anglicans.
a very Western way of living and thinking, and at the same time, we followed all the cultural traditions. We know, we speak Tamil, we enjoy our rasam
Yes.
sadam and things like that. We do have that strong connect, which is culturally, and we, love the beauty of a kolam, and that's also ingrained in us. But there's I mean, like, even now we're speaking in English to each other. So there is that dominance in our heads. And for me, it was a great journey of discovery. And I wouldn't use words like pride and all that because I think that's,
Yeah,
again,
it's
very.
not. Everyone is proud of their own
Yeah,
region, their own
everybody. Yeah,
language,
you
their
can't
own.
say that, but there's certainly a great deal of awareness and a joy in the discoveries that I made, and I'm very thankful and enriched by this experience.
And lastly, the cover of your book. It
Okay.
is so evocative, it's so beautiful. How did you think of that?
It's actually the designer from Aleph called Bena Sarin. She read through the book, and I make a sort of a reference a couple of times. This is in my head, not that I conveyed it, about two little girls modeled very vaguely on my mother and her sister who grew up in a Gandhian household, and with my grandfather being part of the freedom movement, they were not allowed to. They had to wear khadi pavade and all that. And I think the first day in which, August 15, 1947, I write a little vignette where they were sitting and the smell of, my grandmother was making, payasam and whatever have you. For these two little girls, what it meant was that they could be freed from the khadi
Khadi.
pavades and
So
wear
heavy,
any
so
other clothes. And I
cumbersome.
think a lot of that, and I trace a little bit about how they are the symbols of the growing generations of Tamilians. How now many of the descendants are living abroad, and though they're not here, and I thought I'd use them as a symbol of the continuity into modernism from the freedom from 1947 onwards in a free India, and I think she has caught that.
Yes,
And
very well,
very
very
beautifully, and
beautifully.
put those things. I
Very
was surprised and
beautifully.
very touched by that.
And a PS to this, I just wanted to ask you about the Bhakti movement, because you've written very well about the Bhakti movement and also about how Tamil Nadu, this religious tapestry, various religions coming together, not only that, but in Hinduism itself, how the processional deities, how they took them out, the beauty of it, and about the poets. You've written very beautifully about that. So that was really nice because it's very Tamil, isn't it?
Thank you, thank you. I think that in places like, for instance, Srirangam, I think the whole city is built
Celebrates.
around the celebratory mode,
Yeah.
especially of all the processional deities. And I think what it allowed was for the ordinary person to participate in the spirituality was not confined to
Just
Sanskrit texts, and the Alvars and the Nayanmars did a great service by
Bringing it out.
it to the thing, whether it was the devotion of Andal or the more erudite, the more philosophical poetry of the Nayanmar poets, many of them across 4 or 5 centuries. I think many of them the greatness, and of course they were also belonged to different castes, as you know.
Yes,
They were
I
not
know.
just
That
Brahmins.
was
So
really wonderful.
so they managed to get the people along with them, and I think that there was a colorfulness and a celebration of life honed to a spirituality which made a very big difference, I think, to the life of the Tamil people. And I think the Bhakti movement is a great contributor, great, almost, I think, a revolutionary movement at that time.
And now, can we have you read a bit from your book?
Since you spoke about the beginning, the identity, I thought I'd just touch on my epilogue, which is called The Tamil in Us. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs from there. In the end is the beginning. We go back now to the starting point about this ancient people, their lives and pasts, with questions that can never be fully resolved, and explorations that can never be complete. No, that's right. With stories that have no ending. Having trailed through some history, looked at records, lingered at sites where footprints fell thousands of years ago, and heard diverse voices, there's now a clarity about how the passage of time dealt with the people of this part of India. There are, however, many missing beats, as records and literature can never present a composite picture. For instance, we have not always been seized of the plight of ordinary people. History's bias tends to lean towards that which is more visible. But as we tarried at sites and learned from experts, we could see that the anonymous artist, the sculptor, the carpenter, the nomadic trader, the lone writer, and the quiet visionary all left their imprint, and this seeps silently through all the history of the Tamil people. We've been reminded by many scholars that the unheard voices and the travails of ordinary people and voices of dissent are as important as those which are recorded and obvious. As this book began with the land and people, we can go back to asking some Tamils what it meant to them to be Tamil, and if indeed there is a Tamil way. This book began with a gossamer touch on Tamil identity. We find that little or no generalizations can be made, especially as cultural faces of different castes in the region often dominate over larger notions of Tamilness. The notion of identity itself can be dubious, as we know, and we are all many things, and our histories too are many. But at the same time, the people of the Tamil region produce literary masterpieces, great works of art, meditative narratives, and indeed had notions of the world and the universe that came from being distinctively anchored in the region. Being Tamil is therefore the context from which great beauty as well as vision, creativity, and strength have emerged. The much used 2000-year-old adage of the poet Kannayan Pungundranar, Yadum Ure Yavarum Kelir, all towns are mine, all people are my relatives, is a strong vein that runs deep in the Tamil muscle. Beyond the unity of many things, for a Tamil, there lies a body of tangible experience in art, culture, literature, music, cities, and communities, and indeed in the language itself. David Schulman, the great linguist, says Tamil is a certain body of knowledge. Some of it is technical, much of it is intrinsic to an ancient culture and sensibility, well documented in a continuous literary tradition that goes back many centuries. In general, I think of Tamil as a living being, he says, impetuous, sensitive, passionate, whimsical, and in constant movement.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions. Those are sort of negative commentaries on the Tamils. See, the modern definition of any civilization is a nation state. Your culture cannot be cross-border. We blame some religions as, across. So Tamils made the same mistake in the 80s of sympathizing with the LTTE. When our army was fighting with the LTTE, the Tamils supported the LTTE. So when the ship came back with the dead soldiers, the leaders did not even go to receive. And then the Padmanabha murder case, and then after Rajiv Gandhi sacrificed his life, the Tamils sort of redeemed their national identity by punishing the ruling party with just one seat from 160. So that was a forgettable period. The other one is the continuing discrimination against Dalits. Even now, the two-tumbler system prevails as a state which considers itself so modern, IT and whatnot. two-tumbler system is something so shameful. So that, these are two things which doesn't make us a great civilization.
Thank you very much. And I think they both are very important observations. And I agree with you completely that that particular period of Tamil history, due to, I don't know, this frenzy of the Tamil thing that, that gross mistakes were made. And secondly, I'd like to completely, I'm very grateful that you raised this Dalit question, because I do tackle that in the book. And this Vasuki Bhaskar, I don't know if you know him, he's the editor of Neelam magazine. I spoke to him about being Tamil, and he said that is of no concern to me. I am concerned with the fact that the Dalits have been totally suppressed in other states as much and more in here. And he pointed out the kind of things that you've mentioned, the two, not just the two-tumbler policy, but that the temple tank, the tank where the water supply for Dalits has been was desecrated by feces being thrown into it. And these are all very, very recent happenings. And he was... his anger was palpable, because when I asked him, are you aware of your Tamil identity? He said, no, I'm not interested in that. I'm concerned about Dalits, and there's absolutely no progress despite reservation, despite the cornering of certain privileges are all cornered by the select layer of people who are not, who belong to certain communities. And he says there's also hand in hand, there's no real amelioration of that. For instance, if a bank sets up its office, there's a bank that has its branch set up in a village. He says they never put it near the Dalit community. It's always sanctioned near the center of town. And access to services is near impossible. There are still, as you know, murders when young people marry into Dalit communities. And that's a very, very, I'm absolutely glad, thank you for raising that. I think it's a question that's not been really properly addressed in this state and possibly elsewhere. But I have flagged it in the book, and I hope that more work will be done on that front. Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Praveen. I'm a member, and I've not read your book, ma'am, but I have a fundamental question, because there are groups running around Tamil Nadu putting an ISA mark as to who is a Tamil and who is not. According to you, as the author of a book, who is a Tamil?
I don't think any of us can claim Tamilness in that sense. I think if you've, you come from a Telugu family and your family's lived here for generations, I think you have every right to call yourself a Tamil. I don't think there's any particular notion of being born in a family that only speaks a language can be a Tamil. I see this amorphousness in the identity, and I think one of the credits of being a Tamilian is that the old Tamilian who accepted the trader from South Asia, the Armenians who came, I mean, the very fact that they could also call themselves Tamilians, or, the further down south, the Christians, the fishermen, they all feel that they were Tamil. So I think that we do it a disservice when we say only X and Y and Z are Tamil.
I am Ramesh. Well, as a corollary to what you have said, on also the point that has been raised, have you not come across a couple of sets of people who have been hailing from the Dalit community and rose to very great heights of creating a symphony kind of a stuff, all by himself, and not on account of some governmental support or reservations, and he doesn't complain about the two-tumbler stuff, and then he doesn't care a hoots about all those things. But to the contrary, the privileged class of the society keeps him on his on their heads, and they are the one who are supporting him to the hilt. I hope you are able to understand the fact
Yes.
that Ilayaraja is the chosen MP from this part of the world, kind of a thing. But Tamilakam kondadave illiye avara, including the Dalit community itself has not taken a villa for him for becoming a symphony guy, or for that matter an MP kind of a thing. And so Tamilakam himself itself is not praising him, and to the contrary, every effort is being put to put down him because he supports one particular political ideology for the time being. How do you take this kind of a feel?
No, I completely agree with you. But then again, he's an exception, right? He's somebody who has really made it, and he deserves all the support, the acclaim, everything. But there are hundreds of nameless Dalits who are suffering, who are not also cognized. And I think their plight is much more urgent and more difficult. And then us just recognizing this one person. And I absolutely agree with you. I don't know whether it's because to do with him being a Dalit or whether that, there's that subconscious bias that's in operation. And probably that's what you are suggesting, that could be what's at play. But I think equally there are millions of others who are suffering and who are not represented, who have been downtrodden and crushed and continue to be crushed over the several decades, and no hope since all the promises were made in 1947. And even when in the state where there's a great deal of progress towards social justice is one of the main things of the whole Dravidian movement, and I'm afraid there's been a big kind of falling off from that ambition.
Ma'am, at the same time, what is your take on the Vandore Varavaikum Tamilgam, which has not been spoken by us in the last 1 hour or so, whereby S.P. Balasubramaniam is not a Tamilian, but he is a great guy from this part of the world. And P. Sushila is not a Tamilian. M.G. Ramachandran
Yes.
is not a Tamilian. And so Jesudas is not a Tamilian. But all of them have made big time in this part of the world, and we all Tamilians go gaga about all of them. So when that be the case, including your Jayalalitha is not from Tamil Nadu either, because he is a Kannadiga kind of a material. And so what is your take on the Vandore Varavaikum Tamilgam?
I think that you're absolutely right. I think in that sense, it also shows the actual lack of, bias or prejudice in the Tamil mind. We welcome an MGR, we welcome a Jayalalitha, we welcome, all the people you've mentioned. And even Rajnikant, these are all not Tamilians, but great heroes of Tamil Nadu. And I think that's one of the nice traits about Tamilians, that we do that. We vandale varavepom ellareyo. So certainly, I think that that's a positive trait, and it's a particularly Tamil trait. So thank you for pointing that out.
No, in fact, in the malls, in Phoenix Mall, in the ground floor, there's a lot of North.
You spoke about Tamil identity.
So I asked them, in other states they were calling it this and that. So they were all very comfortable with Tamil Nadu, except for the weather. Otherwise, we are very happy here. So has anybody ever troubled you? Is it the Tamils are very busy fighting among themselves? Nobody bothers about us.
A good remark. Thank you.
Madam, you spoke about Tamil identity movement. Presently, it's seen more as a political selling point. But historically, there had been earlier Tamil identity movements. Is there any outcome of such earlier movements, Tamil identity movements?
I think it's particularly in the recent centuries that there's a consciousness about that, and particularly including, the fact is that Tamil language itself was not uplifted till, the people like Robert Caldwell came and wrote about the history of the Tamil language, and he did a great service to elevating the status of Tamil and making clear that this is one of the classical languages of the world. And I think that was a consciousness that came much later, though the language itself has been used with great flair and with great, flowering. And I think there's not a particular Tamil identity that happened in the earlier centuries, at least not that I'm aware of. I don't know if you'd agree, Kausalya.
To me, it's very important to have a pan-Indian consciousness. I mean, be proud of what you have, but also appreciate what others are made of, about their language, about their identity, and to coexist. I think that is important, and I simply do not understand how anyone thinks he or she is superior to somebody else, their language or their identity is more superior to somebody else's. I think we all have our unique identities, and each is good, and we all together make a great nation. No.
Hi, ma'am. everyone's gotten very serious here. My question's not that serious. You said that you had traveled to the Deep South a lot. I just wanted to know if you had any anecdotes from your field work that you'd like to share with us.
Yeah, just what your mother mentioned. Sorry, I revealed your identity, a Tamil identity, mother and daughter identity. No, it's just that Radhika, the thing of that particular thing, you're so used to people who, Hindus going into mosques or churches, and the very fact that this Muslim person, the girl was wearing her, she was wearing a veil. I said that, and this was a little, roadside temple, crowded, and we just got down to see these brightly painted deities, which were very, very charming. And I asked her, "Why are you doing this?" And she said this was some kind of, the Vandi Marecha Swami, somewhere you walk where he protects you on your path. And she said, "Yella Deivamam ondudane." So I just thought that was very moving. And they were not prevented by their habit of not taking, ash and things like that, vibhutis. So I thought that was very, very charming. Similarly, I think there are spaces where, where you met I met a lot of young people who, when we were looking at the climbing the rocks or looking at these various sites, there was a great excitement. They came and joined us, and they were listening to the epigraphist to find out what was the story. And I thought that was charming. You always assume they're coming there to do the graffiti. But in this two instances, I found that there was an automatic drawing of things. So there's a great curiosity about the history of the region. I don't even know whether they were Tamilians or not. Young, college-going kids. And I thought those kind of little instances were very, very moving for me. I mean, I can think of a lot more, but there's no time. Thank you very much.
Hello, ma'am. Congratulations first for your book. And that was a very brave moment to take a step towards writing about Tamils. It's very fantastic because being in Tamil Nadu, writing about Tamils is a very great and honestly, a very brave step. I've not read your book. First thing I want to know is, have you dated back how old is the Tamilians in Tamil Nadu?
See, they found implements, stone implements. They found from the Mesolithic area onwards, which is about 10 lakh years ago or some such thing. And you can't say those. So there was human habitation in the area, in the Madurai region, for instance. But you cannot say that they were Tamil-speaking people. You don't know what language they spoke, indeed, if they spoke any language at all. The earliest Tamil Brahmi inscription was about, they say, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So I would say recorded Tamil history would be from about 4,000 years ago, because again, we found excavations, Kodumanal and places like that, where they found iron, and they found all these beads which were used in trade. And they also found, written inscriptions about with names of people. And some of them were inscriptions written in Pali, which showed that there were people who were coming from the north of the region to do trade with this area. So it's a marvelous, and complex system of finding out exactly what happened when. But I would say roughly about, 3,000 to 4,000 years ago. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much for quoting Mr. Vedachalam, sir. He is my guru also.
Wonderful.
I have learned about epigraphy, iconography, and temple architectures from him. And we also belong to Madurai region and visited all of the places. The second thing, I have only two more questions to ask. Because I am actually very interested into your answers. First thing is, with these two more questions, sorry. One is the Tamil. Have you actually gone with this book only with the epigraphy, iconographies, and the edicts, rock edicts of covering only those things, or have you gone into more researchers based researchers for identifying Tamils?
No, I actually, while I looked at all the sites, I visited Mangulam, for instance, where the first Tamil Brahmi inscription is a very, very difficult climb. But again, Dr. Vedacharam pushed and said, you have to, madam, innu konja neram da, and all that. He was just, I was fooled into climbing this thing. And
did you go to Nagamali?
No, to this, where Mangulam is, right? Yeah, just outside Madurai.
Okay.
So places like that, and always accompanied by those people, and they guided me to people like Airavata Mahadevan to read those books. You know, he's written this marvelous pioneering thing on epigraphy in Tamil Nadu. So those kind of things where while I saw some sites, a lot of the research was based on reading.
Okay. And one more thing is that, yeah, that's right. Sure. The Virumandi there who was residing in Madurai, have you had a chance to visit them and then find the markers?
No, I haven't been able to do that.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Many
much.
of the things I've had to leave.
Yeah,
out,
we're
but,
looking
you know,
forward to your next book.
Thank
also.
you
Thank
so
you
much.
so much.
Very kind of you. Thank you.
Madam, so madam, we have lost, because of the change in the society, we have lost two things. One is the joint family system where we developed high values. The other is creativity. Creativity, we have different occupational systems. They developed all the creativity because three generation or thousands of years, they are doing the same thing. They have the atmosphere to develop the family occupation and all. They developed creativity. These two things we lost because of the joint family, nuclear family system now, and also the technology is different. Labor technology we adopted in the long back, and then it created a lot of literatures and songs and so on. That is different world, pre-technological era. The India belongs to joint family system and pre-technological era, where we developed and reached the peak, whether it is a value or creativity, it reached the peak. But now because of the transformation, we lost these two things. How do we recollect, restore all the creativity and values we developed over thousands of years? How we are going to restore?
I don't
Are
think...
the youth are aware of that? We have lost so many
I don't
things.
think that the joint family system was the final word for all solving all problems. I don't think that was I don't agree with that. I do think that there were other economic pressures and other, other impactful things that happened that, changed people's professional outlook and the kind of professions they carried. So I'm not sure I agree with this notion of joint family, splintering the joint family being the reason for lack of all evil. Yeah.
It's a very interesting book. Actually, Tamils have contributed to the world in different areas. The literary and the philosophical. The Thiruvalluvar, Tirukkural, you would have already covered this. But there is another one, the Siddhanta, Saiva Siddhanta. Mr. Meikandar is the one person who discovered the Saiva Siddhanta and then brought the Advaita to the world. That is Onrai, Verai, Udanai Irukkaanga. That is Thiruvalluvar contributed about Aram Porul Inbam. He contributed about the Veedu. So I think Meikandar is one person who I have to highlight in all your...
Thank you. I think I do mention Saiva Siddhanta,
Yeah.
but I haven't been able to go into it in detail.
Today also
Thank
the
you.
conference they are, I think this Saiva Siddhanta and Tamils are inseparable. Yeah. Thank you.
I have a question. So this is I'd specifically like your opinion on this. So there are a lot of Tamils in this hall today. I was just wondering how many of us here can quote a couple of lines from Shakespeare? How many can quote a couplet from Purananuru or Agananuru? So my opinion is Tamil, for all your books, for your magnum opus, the books by, I think there's another author called Anirudh Kanisati, The Lords of the Earth and Sea. My question is Tamil actually dying? I mean, if the one who said, oh no, can you quote from an Agananuru or a Purananuru? How many under 40 is actually reading Tamil poetry? How many of us have asked our kids to take Tamil as a language in school? No, I'm saying, aren't we the biggest, ma'am, with middle class? So I want your opinion on this, ma'am.
No, I told you, many of us have been, in that sense, Tamilians have been deracinated from our cultural moorings. There's no question of that. I agree with you. We can probably quote Shakespeare more than we can do quote Purananuru or Ahananuru. But I think there is an interest, there's a growing interest, and maybe it's coming from a point of bias because I've started learning, and I am assuming that there is a lot of honestly, by the kind of, I've spoken in a couple of places, I've been surprised by the percentage of younger people who want to know. So I'm not sure whether they all know Tamil or they speak Tamil or read Tamil, but definitely there is an interest. There's no waning interest that much, I feel personally, and it could be coming from a place of bias, I'm not sure. But honestly, there's no question of Tamil dining or Tamil culture going into oblivion. That's my view.
Ma'am, one last question. Tamil as a language,
Yeah, sure.
is it nomadic or is it pastoral?
I'm really.
Culture is dependent, your lifestyle is dependent. So Tamil as a culture, when you're talking of, are we looking at a pastoral society or a nomadic
Yeah,
society?
I think it started off as a pastoral society. Definitely in the Sangam and post-Sangam eras, it was a pastoral thing. And then at that point is when all the poetry developed as well. And it continues into be could be a cultural language. I think there's something that started off in one way, continues to, it's now strongly established and set. I don't think we can quite make those, put them into any specific categories, but I think both are. I mean, there's origin and there's a continuity. I believe in that. Thank you.
So thank you very much for that very, very interesting session. May I now request Mr. Anand, our trustee, to give the vote of thanks?
Two professional journalists with a combined experience of 90 years. Combined experience.
You are age away, Anand.
So if they get into an engaging discussion on a book, it is bound to create a lot of excitement and a lot of questions. That's what happened in the Q&A session. But on behalf of the Chennai International Centre, we thanked Nirmala Lakshman and Kausalya Santanam, and please give them a big round of applause. I have not read the book, but I promise you that I'm going to read it, because the type of interest that it has evoked will generally create a situation where all of us will have to read this book. But I can remember only one very famous film which sort of indirectly touched upon one issue which both of you raised. It was a film that was released in 1980. It was a K. Balachandar movie. It was about unemployment, and the entire movie was shot in Delhi. And Kamal Hassan goes for an interview, and as usual, it was a very fiery interview. He didn't like the way the interviewer was questioning him. So the interviewer asked him, "Are you a Tamilian?" He said, "No, I'm a Tamil-speaking Indian," is what he said. So I just remembered that. But I think, bereft of all the political parts of the whole thing, this is a language which has to be treasured for its own beauty. And Nirmala Lakshman very rightly pointed out, there is creativity, there is history, there is archaeology. There is so much stuff around this language. If we just remove the bias associated with so many things going on around us, I think we will be able to appreciate this language much better than what we otherwise would. So thank you once again for all the effort that you've put in. At the Chennai International Centre, as we have been grappling with this subject of how many book discussions we should continue to have book discussions, because the issue is not about the book. It's about the peripheral part of the book, which also makes it very interesting. And that's what we are striving to do. And our building project is in full flow. And a couple of years from now, you will be in a much better place to sit and enjoy some of the discussions that we seek to do over a period of time. Thank you once again.
Just a few housekeeping announcements. We meet next week on May 10th, and here we have an interesting journey of the Kalaimagal magazine. And after that, on the 24th of May, we have Ambassador Vijay Gokhale, who has been the Foreign Secretary, who is coming to us, and he's talking on the disintegration of the world order, United States and China. So I'll leave you with these two events. We have other events lined up in June, which I'll come to in the next. Yeah, the other development which has taken place is that the Retired Officers Association of the TNIAS has come forward to donate a good sum of 10 lakhs to us, and we thank them for that donation. Thank you.